in a desolate land where every decision carries unpredictable consequences. Cole, a man who has witnessed countless pain and loss, now faces a tough choice to continue living in the shadows of his past, or step out into the light in search of peace, love, and new opportunities. When an invitation from his brother offers a different path, will Cole be able to shake off the ghosts of his past and embrace a future he's long rejected? Imagine if it were you. What would you choose? Leave everything behind and venture into a new life full of promise, or stay in the safety of the familiar, where you've found some peace within yourself? This is the story of Cole, a man who's been through so much loss, a man who teaches us that sometimes stepping out of the darkness isn't about fear, but about the brave act of finding yourself again. If you've ever faced a big decision in life, you won't want to miss this story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can continue this journey with us. The winter of 1887 had blanketed the American West in a thick layer of snow, covering the rolling mountains, endless plains, and dirt roads that seemed to stretch on forever. The air was biting cold, with a westward wind howling through the dense pine forests, sending swirling snowflakes down to the ground. The winter chill was like a heavy blanket, draping everything in this wild land. The people who lived here were no strangers to solitude, to the cold of nature and the harshness of the life they faced every day. Talon Creek, a small village nestled by the Colorado River, was where the colorful stories of the West were written day by day. This wasn't a bustling town, but a community of brave souls who had chosen to live in simple log cabins tucked beneath towering pine trees, where the dirt road was the only link between everything. The people here never had to worry about noise because their lives had only one color, the color of resilience. In this village lived a man named Cole Donovan. At 46 years old, Cole was a seasoned cowboy, a man who had built his life with sweat and tears. He wasn't like the other men in the area, the ones who sought warmth in parties, laughter, and moments of joy. Cole had once had a family, a loving wife, and a young son, but all of that was taken from him in a tragic accident. The grief, the loss, and the painful memories of his family had turned Cole into a quiet man, living in isolation. He no longer believed in love or hope, and he had no reason to dream of better things. Everything was just emptiness and memories that would never fade. One evening, as the wind began to pick up from the mountains and the snow started to fall heavier, Cole decided to leave his ranch once more, to once again venture out and herd cattle through the winter. It was the only work he had left, the work he'd done for years, to keep busy and forget the pain inside. But this trip was different from the others. A sudden blizzard hit, making everything unclear, and progress became impossible. As the storm intensified, Cole had no choice but to seek shelter. He guided his horse toward the nearest inn in the village, the place where strangers like him would often stop on those snow-covered nights. Mrs. O'Hara's small inn had been a place where many travelers had taken refuge during the harsh winters. Cole Donovan stepped into Mrs. O'Hara's inn while the snow continued to fall thickly outside, covering the very trail he had just walked. The large wooden door creaked open, releasing a wave of warmth from inside. The smell of freshly baked bread and burning firewood from the hearth quickly soothed the biting cold that clung to him, though it wasn't a luxurious place. The atmosphere of the inn brought an oddly comforting and familiar feeling, something Cole hadn't felt in a long time. Mrs. O'Hara a woman in her 50s with thinning silver hair, rose from a wooden chair as she saw the stranger enter. She wore a simple brown dress and a thick woolen shawl, her appearance modest but warm. Her smile wasn't wide, but it was enough to make Cole feel welcomed without any need for words. Mrs. O'Hara didn't ask about Cole's past, didn't pry into the suffering he carried with him. She simply said, in a soft, inviting tone, "You must be needing a place to rest. Cowboy." Her voice was warm, like an invitation not only for physical shelter but also for some quiet solace. "Thank you, ma'am," Cole replied, peeling off his thick coat to reveal a cowboy outfit dusted with snow. He felt a bit awkward stepping into this cozy space where there seemed to be no room for the solitude he had grown so accustomed to. As Mrs. O'Hara began preparing dinner, Eleanor, her daughter, entered from the next room. Eleanor, around 28 years old, had long, dark hair neatly tied back with a thin string. Her sharp green eyes immediately caught Cole's attention, pulling him in with their depth. She wore a simple cotton dress, plain yet graceful, radiating both gentleness and strength. She greeted Cole with a soft smile, but there was something in her eyes that made Cole pause. "Hello, I'm Eleanor," she said, lightly brushing a strand of hair away from her forehead. "My grandmother said you needed to rest. If you don't mind, we'll be having a simple dinner. It's a pleasure to meet you." "Eleanor," Cole replied, feeling a bit flustered as he realized that this was the first time in a long while that he'd been face to face with a woman like her. The strength and understanding in Eleanor's gaze made him feel cared for, but it was a kind of care he didn't know how to accept. Eleanor continued to help Mrs. O'Hara with the preparations for dinner. The simple but heartfelt dishes they served warmed Cole's spirit. Though they didn't speak much, he could feel the affection behind each small gesture from Mrs. O'Hara and Eleanor. They didn't rush him, didn't pry too much into his past, but simply allowed him to feel like part of the space. This feeling, to Cole, was strange and hard to understand. He had grown too accustomed to isolation, to not needing to explain or express his emotions. But here, in this room, everything seemed to be changing. The dinner, simple but cozy bread, vegetable soup, and roast beef was enough to warm his body and create a comfortable atmosphere. Throughout the meal, Cole remained mostly silent, occasionally sipping water from a wooden mug. Mrs. O'Hara and Eleanor shared stories of life in Talon Creek, about the snowy winters and the hardships of living in this place. They didn't talk much about themselves, but instead shared the simple things in life. "We've lived here for many years," Mrs. O'Hara said. "Talon Creek is small, but it's our home. Even when times are tough, we always find a way to survive through each winter." Eleanor added, "That's true, but not everything is easy. Loss, sorrow, those are things we can't escape from around here." She looked at Cole gently, as though those words weren't just part of a story, but a quiet offering of something personal. Cole felt an unexpected connection with them, though he had never intended to open up. He didn't know what to say, so he simply listened. His silence wasn't a defense anymore, but a quiet acceptance, as if he was slowly starting to open himself to people he never expected. When dinner was over, Mrs. O'Hara stood up to clear the table. Eleanor followed behind, picking up the plates and bowls. Cole felt a bit awkward, but Eleanor smiled at him and said, "If you like, we can offer you a room to rest in. It's not large, but it will be warm enough for the night." Cole nodded, quietly thanking her. He didn't say more, but inside he felt a small shift. Their warmth, their care, left him confused, but at the same time it made his heart feel something strange, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. He stood up, and as he walked toward the room Eleanor had pointed to, he glanced back at Mrs. O'Hara and Eleanor once more. They were still working, but in the air he could sense a quiet peace, a care he never imagined he could find here. The next morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the small window of his room, Cole woke up feeling a sense of relief, but also a bit of confusion. The snowstorm was still raging outside, though not as violently as the night before. The cold winds that blew through the cracks in the door made the small room feel even warmer. Cole got out of bed and looked through the window, where the snow still blanketed everything in sight, as though time had paused in a moment of serene stillness. He felt a peace he hadn't experienced before, but there was also an undeniable awkwardness in his heart. It had been so long since he'd felt cared for, welcomed, for years. Cole had lived in the shadow of his past, in solitude, and now, in this cozy home, something was shifting, something he didn't want to touch, but couldn't avoid. He dressed in his snow-covered cowboy gear, feeling a little uncomfortable in this simplicity, but still made his way downstairs, where breakfast was being prepared. As he entered the dining room, Cole saw Mrs. O'Hara busy setting the table. Eleanor stood next to the table, stirring a pot of hot soup with a wooden spoon. When she saw him, Eleanor looked up and flashed a gentle smile. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" Eleanor asked, her voice soft and warm. She didn't rush to ask why he was here, didn't inquire about his past. She simply greeted him as though he were an old friend returning home. "Good morning," Cole replied, the awkwardness creeping back again. "I slept fine. Thank you." He moved toward a chair near the table, sitting down and looking at the simple meal Mrs. O'Hara had prepared. Nothing fancy, just bread, eggs, and vegetable soup. But there was a warmth to it, a comfort that made him feel at ease. Breakfast passed in silence, but it was a different kind of silence. Not the silence of loneliness, but the silence of understanding. Eleanor and Mrs. O'Hara didn't ask much about Cole's past, and Cole didn't feel the need to share. There was no pressure, just quiet acceptance. When breakfast was over, Mrs. O'Hara stood up to clear the table. Eleanor lingered for a moment, her eyes on Cole, as though waiting for something from him. But she didn't speak. Cole felt a light tension in the air, though he couldn't quite explain why. Perhaps it was because of the way Eleanor's gaze was so understanding, making him feel a strange unfamiliarity within himself. Finally, Eleanor broke the silence. "Would you like to go for a walk?" she asked. Her green eyes filled with sincerity. "The clear sky and cold air will help clear your mind." Cole looked out the window, where snow still covered every corner, creating a peaceful but cold landscape. He didn't respond immediately. A walk in this biting cold wasn't something he usually did, but there was something about Eleanor's invitation that he couldn't refuse. "All right, I'll go," he finally said, standing up and pulling on his thick coat. Eleanor smiled and led the way outside, through the back door and into the small garden behind the inn. The fresh air hit Cole, making him feel a bit dizzy. The atmosphere of the Wild West was unlike anything he'd known in the city where he'd lived for years. There were no car horns, no rush of busy life, only the sound of fallen snow and the whisper of the wind. Eleanor guided him through open fields, where the trees had shed all their leaves, leaving only bare branches reaching up to the sky like reminders of a past long gone. They didn't speak much, but with each step through this quiet scene, Cole felt a strange sense of comfort. When they reached a small hill, Eleanor stopped and turned to look at Cole. "You're not someone who likes to share, are you?" she asked, her voice gentle, more of an observation than a question. Cole was surprised. He never thought Eleanor could see that. But her eyes, the understanding in the way she looked at him, made him feel like she understood him more than he understood himself. "Yeah," Cole admitted, his voice a bit distant. "I've learned to live alone. And you think that living like this will keep you from feeling pain?" Eleanor asked, her gaze free of judgment, just a soft empathy. Cole paused for a moment, not answering immediately. He looked into Eleanor's eyes, those eyes that weren't probing, weren't critical, but full of compassion. "No," he said, his voice quiet, "but I don't know what else to do. I don't believe in love or anything good anymore." Eleanor took a step closer, looking at him with sincere eyes. "That's because you haven't found the people worth trusting," she said. "Sometimes silence isn't strength, it's fear. You're afraid to open up." Cole felt his heart tighten. She was right. He was afraid to face the pain of his past, afraid to open up to someone else, afraid to trust anyone again. But deep down, he also longed for a change. He wanted to find what he had lost, but he didn't know how to move past that fear. They stood in silence for a long while, only the sound of the wind rustling through the bare branches filling the air. Then Eleanor smiled softly and began to walk back, glancing over her shoulder to say to Cole, "Let's head back. Cole, the storm isn't quite over yet." Cole didn't say anything, but he followed her, a strange sense of relief filling his heart. He never thought he'd be ready to open up to anyone, but now, maybe, just maybe, he was. The next day, as the snowstorm finally subsided, the fresh air of Talon Creek returned, bringing with it an almost surreal sense of peace. The white snow covered the trails around the village, making everything look still as a painting. The sun, weak and shy, peeked through the clouds, casting warm rays that reflected off the snow like tiny diamonds. Cole stepped out of his small room, sensing a shift in the air not just in the landscape, but within himself. The past few days in Talon Creek, in Mrs. O'Hara's home, had given him time to think and face the unresolved pain he had been carrying. He knew he couldn't keep living in the past forever. But those wounds didn't heal so easily, and he still didn't know how to confront them. As he stepped outside, Eleanor's gaze once again caught his attention. She was working in the garden behind the house, tending to the flowers that Mrs. O'Hara had planted last spring. Eleanor moved with a gentle yet purposeful grace. She wasn't rushing, wasn't showing off, she was simply blending into nature, letting it nourish her as a part of it. Eleanor looked up when she heard Cole's footsteps. She smiled and then went back to her work. "Good morning, Cole," Eleanor said, her voice still soft as ever. "My grandmother is preparing lunch. Would you like to help me in the garden?" Cole looked at her, then moved closer. "I don't know anything about gardening," he said, but he couldn't bring himself to refuse Eleanor's offer. The desire to help her, even with small things, was starting to emerge in him. "That's okay." Eleanor laughed. "We just need to do some light work." She handed him a small trowel. "I can show you how to trim the plants." Lunch that day was simple but satisfying. with a delicious vegetable stew that Mrs. O'Hara had prepared early in the morning, after the meal. Mrs. O'Hara rested in her chair, while Eleanor and Cole went out again, not to work in the garden this time, but to take a walk around the small village. This time, their conversation wasn't awkward or centered around past questions. Eleanor began to open up more, sharing with Cole about her growing-up years, about the simple but tough life she and her mother had faced after losing her father. The stories didn't just bring understanding, they opened a door for Cole to see the strength and resilience that Eleanor carried inside. "We've been through so much loss," Eleanor said, her eyes growing thoughtful. "But my mother always said that loss isn't the end. It's just a part of life. We can't live forever in pain. We have to let go and move on." Cole listened, feeling an indescribable feeling rising in his chest. Eleanor's words felt like advice, a truth he had long forgotten. Love and hope weren't easily found, but sometimes they were the very things needed to heal the wounds inside. "What about you?" Eleanor asked, her eyes lighting up with curiosity. "What have you lost?" "Cole. And what have you found along the way?" Cole was silent for a long moment, staring into Eleanor's eyes. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how much to share, but then he decided, no matter how painful, no matter how hard, he would start to open up. "I lost my wife and son in an accident," Cole began, his voice quiet, heavy with the weight of his past. "I've lived a life full of regrets and loneliness since then. I don't believe in love or anything good anymore. I just exist, not expecting anything." Eleanor stood quietly, listening, not saying a word more. She simply stood there, looking at him with eyes full of understanding and compassion. That look made Cole feel as though a part of him was beginning to heal, as if this conversation wasn't just a typical exchange, but a real shift in his life. "You've lived in pain for too long," Eleanor said after a while, her voice gentle, as if she were trying to ease his heart. "Love isn't something you find in a day, but if you allow yourself to open up, you'll see that there are still good things in this world." Her words were a reminder of what he had lost and what he could possibly find again. But would he have the courage to do so? Could he accept love once more, after everything that had happened? As they made their way back to the inn, the afternoon light began to fade, but Cole's mind was alive with a new feeling. He had never thought his life could change, but now he realized that maybe, just maybe, with one small step, he could change his entire life. They returned to the living room, where Mrs. O'Hara was waiting for them. Dinner would soon be prepared, and the warmth of the house once again surrounded them like a thick, comforting blanket, bringing peace that Cole hadn't felt in a long time. Eleanor looked at Cole, her eyes full of care. "Would you like to join us for dinner?" she asked, once again inviting him into a world that he was beginning to feel warmth and love in. Cole looked into Eleanor's eyes, and this time he didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, his voice soft but filled with certainty. "I'd love to." That evening, the atmosphere inside Mrs. O'Hara's inn grew warm and full of light. The crackling fire in the hearth illuminated the faces of those gathered around the dining table, adding an intimate touch to the evening. The simple but flavorful dishes, like beef stew and freshly toasted bread, were laid out by Mrs. O'Hara. All three sat down together, but this time Cole felt a shift within himself. He no longer felt like an outsider. For the first time in a long while, He felt like he was part of this warm space. Eleanor had changed from the quiet, reserved girl into someone more open, engaging in conversation with both Cole and Mrs. O'Hara. Stories about Mrs. O'Hara's life and the challenges her family had overcome over the years created an easy atmosphere, making Cole feel like everything around him had softened, as if he were rediscovering a part of himself that he had long forgotten. "Do you think that someday we can leave the past behind and move forward?" Eleanor asked suddenly, as dinner continued. She turned to Cole, her gaze understanding and deep. "Maybe the wounds will never fully heal, but we can learn to live with them." Cole was silent for a moment, unsure how to respond. Eleanor's words felt like an invitation to step out of the darkness he had lived in for so long. He had learned to live in solitude, to keep his pain to himself. But now, standing here with Eleanor and Mrs. O'Hara, he felt a pull to change, to face his past in order to move forward. "I'm not sure I can leave it all behind," Cole said, his voice calm, "but I think I'm ready to try. At least once." Eleanor smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. She understood that, although the wounds might be old, they weren't easy to forget. She, too, had gone through loss in her life, but she always believed that it was only when we face our pain that we can begin to heal. "We can't change the past," Eleanor said, "but we can decide how we face it. I think, if you want, I can walk this journey with you." Her words made Cole feel as though he had received a precious gift. Not a gift of material things, but the gift of acceptance, the willingness to stand by him as he faced his past and healed his wounds. He looked into Eleanor's eyes, and this time, he didn't feel hesitation or fear. He felt a sense of calm, as if she were someone he could trust. Dinner continued with light-hearted stories about the everyday lives of Mrs. O'Hara and Eleanor. But inside Cole, something profound was changing. He started to feel that he could let go of the burdens that had followed him for so many years. He no longer felt like an outsider. He no longer felt like a stranger in his own life. After dinner, Mrs. O'Hara sat by the fire, waving them over to join her. "Let's sit for a while, share a little more," she said, her voice gentle, like an invitation to open up. Sometimes, small stories help us find big comfort. Cole and Eleanor sat down near Mrs. O'Hara. The light from the fire illuminated their faces, casting soft shadows that made the moment feel intimate and warm. Their conversation wasn't just small talk anymore, it was a sharing of true emotions, moments of connection between three people from different worlds. Mrs. O'Hara began to recount memories of life before she and her family had faced great challenges. She spoke of the early days in Talon Creek, of how she had learned to survive after losing her husband, and the difficulties of raising Eleanor on her own. But in those stories, she always looked at the past with optimism, as if each challenge was an opportunity to grow and learn. Eleanor shared more about her childhood, how she grew up in hardship, but didn't feel bitterness. She said those struggles had taught her how to be strong and resilient. "What else can we do if we don't have hope?" Eleanor asked, her eyes fixed on the fire. "Hope is the only thing that keeps us standing, even when everything around us falls apart." Cole listened closely to every word Eleanor said. Her words weren't just simple encouragements, they were deep lessons he'd never thought of. In all his years of solitude, he had forgotten what hope truly was, and now it was reappearing in Eleanor's voice. The stories about life, family, love, and loss made Cole feel lighter than ever. He no longer felt like an outsider. The loneliness that had once consumed him was gradually being replaced with a sense of connection and understanding, something he never imagined could exist in such a harsh world. As the night grew darker, the firelight began to fade. Mrs. O'Hara stood up, smiling. "It's getting late," she said. "We need to rest to prepare for tomorrow, but I believe we've found something precious tonight." Cole looked at Mrs. O'Hara and Eleanor. This time, he didn't feel weighed down by the past. He felt a new strength, a source of motivation he had never known before. "Definitely," Cole replied, a sense of peace washing over him. "I'll find my way." The sun had risen over Talon Creek the next morning, but a sense of quiet stillness hung over the small village. The snowstorm had passed, leaving behind a bright day, cold but crisp. The landscape was still blanketed in thick snow, but the morning light seemed to awaken everything, creating a sense of newness, of hope. The white snow stretched across the fields, and Cole couldn't help but be struck by the peaceful beauty of the place, a peace he hadn't felt in a long time. After breakfast, Mrs. O'Hara went out to the garden to check on a few unfinished tasks. Eleanor had her own things to do, but she didn't rush off. She wanted to talk more with Cole, to learn more about him, his past, and the thoughts he kept hidden. There were no overly sweet words between them, but their eyes found each other in the silent moments they shared. "Do you think you're ready to face your past?" Eleanor asked, as she pulled a chair closer to the fire, looking at Cole cautiously. "You've been living alone for too long. Cole, maybe it's time to find the missing part of your life?" Cole sat still, a heavy feeling in his chest. He wasn't someone who easily opened up, but Eleanor's question forced him to think. Maybe she was right. He had been living in darkness for so long, and the wounds of the past had become a part of him, inseparable. But could he truly face them? "Actually," Cole began, his voice low and hard to hear, "I'm not sure I can. My past has always been there, and I don't know how to escape it." Eleanor looked at him with patience, not rushing him, just listening. "You don't have to forget the past, Cole. You just need to learn how to live with it, so it no longer controls your life." Her words made Cole reflect deeply. He looked into her eyes and saw an understanding he'd never experienced before. Over the years, he had closed himself off from everything, trying to protect his heart from hurt. But now, standing before Eleanor, he felt something changing. "And you think I can do that?" Cole asked, a hint of skepticism in his voice, but also a glimmer of hope hidden within. "Of course you can," Eleanor answered, offering a small, gentle smile, "because I believe that everyone can heal themselves if they allow it." A strange feeling swept over Cole. Her words weren't just flowery phrases, but a simple yet profound truth. He didn't need to keep running, didn't need to continue living in pain. If he allowed himself to open up, he could have a chance to reclaim a part of the life he had forgotten. That afternoon, lunch was simple but warm, and after the meal, Mrs. O'Hara asked Cole to help with some work in the garden. Eleanor also joined in, helping her mother with the small tasks. Cole didn't refuse, even though gardening wasn't his favorite activity, but something inside him had changed. These simple tasks didn't feel forced or difficult anymore. He began to feel like part of this family, part of a life he once thought he had lost. "We could build a new well out back." "Mrs." O'Hara said as they started digging a small hole. "The old one's been out of use for a while, and we need to keep the water warm for the winter." Eleanor looked at Cole, her eyes bright. "Would you help us with this? Even just a little bit? It would be really useful." Cole looked up at Mrs. O'Hara and Eleanor, feeling a strange connection between them. These tasks seemed simple enough, but they gave him a real sense of being part of the life here. He realized that maybe this was how he could begin to heal the wounds inside him. "I think I can," Cole said, a faint smile on his face. "I'll help." The three of them continued their work through the afternoon. As the sun began to set and the sky turned purple, they completed their task. Cole hadn't just helped Mrs. O'Hara and Eleanor build a new well, he'd helped himself find a part of his soul that had long been forgotten. When they entered the house, Mrs. O'Hara paused, looked at Cole, and said, "I see you've changed a little. Cole, we all can change, if we're patient enough and don't give up." Mrs. O'Hara's words made Cole feel as though he had accomplished something meaningful. It wasn't just about building a new well, it was about starting to rebuild himself, piece by piece, from the fragments of his past. As night fell, the warmth of the house surrounded them all. Mrs. O'Hara sat by the fire, while Eleanor and Cole sat across from each other, sharing small stories about life in the village. No more heavy words or uncomfortable questions. All that was left was understanding, sharing, and the peaceful moments of life. "Do you think we'll see each other again in the future?" Eleanor asked, her eyes holding a glimmer of hope. Cole didn't answer immediately. He looked into Eleanor's bright eyes and knew that, no matter what the future held, he was ready to move forward, because here, with these people, he had found the strength to live again, to love, and to continue his journey. "Definitely," Cole replied, his voice gentle but filled with certainty. "I believe we'll meet again, and we'll find our way." Christmas was fast approaching, and the atmosphere in Talon Creek was warmer than ever. The winter winds had died down, giving way to a bright, clear sky and warm sunlight that shimmered on the white snow. The entire village began preparing for a simple yet cozy holiday season, a Christmas where love, hope, and sharing were the most precious gifts. Cole had begun to feel the changes within himself. He no longer lived behind the invisible walls he had built to protect himself from pain. Each passing day, he felt closer to the people around him, especially to Eleanor and Mrs. O'Hara. Silence was no longer his shield. Instead, he found himself sharing and listening, engaging in conversations about life and unfulfilled dreams. Though not one to join in large celebrations, Cole couldn't ignore the festive and hopeful atmosphere of Christmas. Mrs. O'Hara's inn had been decorated with a Christmas tree and twinkling lights. Filling the space with warmth and coziness, Eleanor and her mother had prepared traditional holiday dishes, and the inn's atmosphere became more alive as the guests also joined in the preparations for the Christmas evening. Today, Eleanor and her mother went out to the garden to fetch a tree for decoration. It wasn't a big tree, but it was perfect for adding the holiday charm. Cole decided to join them, even though it was just a small part of the task. He wanted to feel the family warmth he had never truly known, and he realized he was yearning for it. As the three of them walked into the small forest behind the inn, Eleanor pointed to a tall pine tree standing among the slender, tall trunks. "We'll pick this one," she said confidently, her eyes bright with certainty. It's beautiful and tall enough to decorate." Cole looked at the tree, feeling slightly out of place. He never thought he would participate in decorating a Christmas tree again, but now everything was different. There were no grand words spoken, but the warmth in the air made him feel like he was part of something bigger and more meaningful. Mrs. O'Hara showed Cole how to cut branches so they would be easier to decorate later. Eleanor had prepared the lights and small decorations. The work wasn't hard, but it brought a lightness to Cole, as if he were slowly shedding the layers he had built over the years. The connection in this family, the peace and love, were things he hadn't experienced in a long time. When they brought the tree inside, Mrs. O'Hara was surprised to see how beautiful it was. "This will definitely be a wonderful Christmas tree," she said, her eyes lighting up with joy. "Thank you, Cole." Cole didn't know what to say, but Mrs. O'Hara's smile made him feel completely at ease. He had never imagined he would be part of creating something beautiful like this. The tree became a symbol of the change inside him, of a Christmas filled with hope and love. "You don't need to thank me," Eleanor said, her eyes still shining. "We did this together." That Christmas evening, as the fire crackled in the hearth, the lights on the tree twinkled throughout the room. The three of them sat around the dinner table, enjoying simple but heartfelt food. There were light-hearted stories, gentle games, everything that made Cole feel as if he had found what he had lost. There were no grand celebrations, but for Cole, this was a warm and complete Christmas. After dinner, Eleanor took a small gift and handed it to Cole. "My Christmas gift for you," she said, gently placing the box in his hands. Cole was surprised. He looked at the small box and opened it. Inside was a soft, blue woolen scarf, warm and cozy. "Thank you," he said, his voice slightly choked. He couldn't imagine receiving a gift this Christmas, not one born from pity, but from sincere love. Eleanor smiled, then turned to Mrs. O'Hara. "Mom, I think we did this together, didn't we?" Mrs. O'Hara nodded, a soft smile crossing her face. "Yes, my dear. Life isn't always perfect, but when we have each other, that's what matters most." Cole sat quietly, feeling the weight of Mrs. O'Hara's words. This Christmas wasn't just about gifts or big meals. It was about the connections between people, about sharing simple yet meaningful moments. "Christmas isn't just one day," Mrs. O'Hara said, as if she understood Cole's thoughts. "Christmas is about the people around us, about the love we give to one another." Mrs. O'Hara's words filled Cole with a deep warmth. He was no longer an outsider, he was part of this family, and that was the most important thing he could feel in his life. As night fell, the three of them stepped outside, gazing up at the sky where the stars shimmered like lights of hope on the new path Cole was starting to walk. Cole felt a lightness, a belief in the future, no matter the challenges, because in his heart, he had found something more precious than anything else in the world: love and acceptance. As winter passed, Talon Creek began to change. The snowstorms slowly faded, making way for the warm rays of spring. The snow began to melt. Little streams rushed through the pathways, and trees started to sprout new buds. Cole could feel this change not just in the world around him, but also within himself. Each day that passed, he slowly left behind the dark parts of his past, the deep wounds he had buried for so long. Eleanor remained the one by his side, gentle yet determined. She never pushed Cole to open up, but her presence, her understanding, and her patience made him realize that he didn't have to carry everything alone. Little by little, he began to trust and share the deep things inside of him. The daily conversations with Mrs. O'Hara and Eleanor about life, struggles, and unfulfilled dreams taught him so much about love, hope, and forgiveness. One day, as the afternoon sun streamed through the window, Cole sat alone in the living room of the inn, holding a cup of coffee, his eyes gazing out the window. In the stillness, he suddenly realized he was standing at a major crossroads. He couldn't keep living in the past. If he wanted a future, he had to leave behind what had been and open himself to new possibilities. Despite the fear and the uncertainty, he was ready. The change inside Cole hadn't been easy. He still carried fears, doubts about his ability to love and be loved, but he also understood that if he didn't try, he would never know what could happen. And there was one thing he knew for sure: if he didn't change, if he didn't allow himself to love, he would forever live in loneliness. When Mrs. O'Hara and Eleanor returned from the garden, they immediately noticed the difference in Cole's demeanor. He was no longer the silent, brooding man he had once been, though his eyes still held the depth of years filled with pain. Now they also carried a new hope. Eleanor looked at Cole with a soft gaze. "Would you like to go for a walk?" she asked, her eyes glowing with hope. Cole looked at her, then out the window. "I think I need to do something," he replied, his voice steadier than ever. "I've been thinking a lot about what's happened, and I realize I can't keep living in what's been. I need to change, Eleanor." Eleanor paused for a moment, her eyes full of empathy. "Then, let's start," she said with a smile. "We'll move forward together." They stepped outside, into the cold of the late afternoon. The light breeze made the branches sway, and the sky above slowly turned a soft pink from the sunset. Despite the chill, there was something in the air that made Cole feel truly alive. He no longer felt like an outsider, but like part of life, part of relationships filled with affection. "Have you made a decision?" Eleanor asked when they stopped on a small hill overlooking the area outside the inn. "About the future," Cole asked back, his eyes searching hers, as though waiting for help, for encouragement. Eleanor nodded, her eyes sincere. "You can say it, if you want." Cole looked at the fading light of the day, his eyes deep in thought. "I want to start over. I want to change. I want to find a life that isn't weighed down by the ghosts of the past. And I think, if I do this, I need to do it with the people I trust." Eleanor stood beside him, saying nothing more. She was simply there, as if her presence was all that Cole needed. He felt the strength and comfort in her gaze, and it gave him peace. "You won't have to do it alone," Eleanor said, her voice soft but powerful. "Because no matter where you go, no matter what you do, I'll always be by your side." A warm feeling spread through Cole. For the first time in many years, he felt that he wasn't carrying everything on his own. He had Eleanor, he had Mrs. O'Hara, he had this family, and that made him feel stronger than ever. When they returned to the inn, the warmth inside was more comforting than ever. Mrs. O'Hara was preparing dinner, and the atmosphere in the house was filled with tranquility. The challenging days were behind them, and now the three of them could feel the connection and love in every moment. That evening's dinner was warm. As they ate, simple stories about village life, future plans, and what they had been through together made Cole feel like he was no longer alone. He had found family, love, and hope. Mrs. O'Hara looked at Cole and said, "You've changed, haven't you?" Cole looked at her, his eyes sparkling. "Yes, I have changed, and I feel ready for the good things to come." That night, as the light from the fire gently illuminated their faces, Cole felt a sense of belief in the future filling his heart. He didn't know where life would lead him, but one thing was certain: he was no longer afraid. He had loved ones beside him, and that was the most important thing. Time passed quickly, and spring in Talon Creek brought about a noticeable change not just in nature, but in Cole's life as well. The trees began to sprout new buds, and the small streams gradually melted, babbling through the hills and breathing life into a land that had been covered by snow for so long. This refreshing scenery mirrored Cole's own mood. He was ready to step out of the shadows of the past and seek a new future. But even though spring brought newness, the wounds in his heart were not fully healed. Cole knew that. Despite the significant changes in his life, he still had to face the pain and the tough decisions that he couldn't avoid. One of those decisions was whether he could truly let go of the past and open his heart to a new love. Eleanor was still by his side, always listening, always understanding. She never pushed him to change too quickly, but there were moments when her gaze, her gentle words, made Cole realize he might be missing a precious opportunity. But he didn't know if he had enough courage to step into a new relationship when the past still haunted him. One morning, as the spring sunlight streamed through the window, Cole stood by the windowsill, looking out at the garden. Everything around him was fresh, but in his heart there were still questions without answers. He had lived in isolation for so long, so accustomed to pain and loss. Could he love again, even just a small part of his heart? Could he let Eleanor into his life when he still hadn't fully forgiven himself for the mistakes of the past? Eleanor walked in, seeing the thoughtful expression in his eyes. "Cole," she called softly, making him turn toward her. "I know you've been thinking a lot about what's happened, but do you know that you deserve to be happy?" Cole looked into Eleanor's bright eyes, and for the first time he felt no hesitation in his heart. "I don't know, Eleanor. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to mess up again." Eleanor stepped closer and gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "You haven't messed up, Cole. You just need to allow yourself to live, to allow yourself to love. Love isn't perfect. It can hurt, but it can also heal." Eleanor's words made Cole's heart tighten. He wanted to believe in them, but was he strong enough to open his heart? He had shut his heart for so long, and now he had to face his own fear. "I'll always be here," Eleanor said, her voice full of understanding. "You don't have to face everything alone anymore. I'll be with you, no matter what you decide." Eleanor's words made Cole feel that he was no longer alone. He felt the warmth from her, the love she had for him. But was that enough to make him step out of his shell? After a moment of silence, Cole finally spoke. "I want to believe in that, Eleanor. I really do." And so, after all the thoughts, all the sleepless nights, Cole decided to open his heart. He couldn't keep living in the pain of the past. He needed to move forward, to allow himself to seek a new future, even if it might be challenging. The next day, Cole and Eleanor walked through the small forest behind the inn, where they had once searched for the Christmas tree. But this time, it wasn't just quiet steps in the stillness. They talked about the future, about what they hoped to achieve. During their conversation, Cole felt a great shift within himself. He was ready to start again. That evening, as the light from the fire illuminated the room, Cole looked at Mrs. O'Hara and Eleanor, feeling the warmth and love they had for him. "I want to thank both of you," he said, his voice a little choked. "Because of you, I've been able to find myself again." Mrs. O'Hara smiled, her eyes filled with kindness. "You've done very well. Cole, don't be too hard on yourself. We all can change, as long as we dare to step out of the past and live in the present." Eleanor looked at Cole, her eyes gentle. "We'll move forward together, won't we?" Cole nodded, for the first time feeling certainty in his heart. "Yes, we'll move forward together." That evening's dinner became a memorable moment for Cole. A simple meal, yet filled with love. The three of them sat together, sharing stories, laughter, love, sharing, and those simple moments helped Cole realize that he was no longer alone in this world. He had family, love, and most importantly, he had found himself. In the days that followed, Cole no longer felt the loneliness that once consumed him. He began to dream about the future, a future no longer burdened by the shadows of the past. With Eleanor and Mrs. O'Hara, he would build a new life, a life not just of survival, but of truly living. Spring in Talon Creek was beautiful. The landscape had changed dramatically, from fields covered in snow now replaced by lush green grass and trees starting to bud with new life. But it wasn't just nature that had changed. Cole's life was also slowly transforming in ways he had never imagined. After years of living in isolation and closure, he had finally opened his heart, ready to embrace what life had to offer. Eleanor and Mrs. O'Hara were always there beside him, supporting and sharing the first steps of this new journey. They weren't just close family members, but true friends, people who had helped him understand that life isn't just about existing, but living fully and meaningfully. One early morning, as the first rays of spring sunlight streamed through the window, Cole woke up and felt the change in the air. Today was going to be special. Today, he would have an important meeting with a man he never thought he'd see again after so many years, Thomas Dawson, the man who had betrayed him and his team during a cattle drive years ago. The name Dawson always brought pain to Cole's heart. But today, something inside him told him that it was time to face the past, time to confront the man who had made him lose trust in others. Though a bit anxious, Cole knew that if he didn't resolve this, he wouldn't be able to fully break free from the shadow of the past. Eleanor had told him that sometimes healing didn't come from revenge, but from forgiveness and moving forward. But Cole also understood that sometimes, in order to move forward, he had to face the old challenges. As Cole stepped outside, Mrs. O'Hara was sitting by the fireplace, busy preparing breakfast. Eleanor was out tending to the flowers on the porch. Even though it was spring, the early morning was still a bit chilly, the air fresh and cool. Cole took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air of the new season, but a bit of worry lingered in his heart. He walked over to the table where Mrs. O'Hara had set a cup of coffee and sat down. "What's on your mind, Cole, Mrs.?" O'Hara asked, her voice gentle but full of concern. "You seem troubled about something." Cole didn't hide anything from Mrs. O'Hara. He knew she always understood him, always saw through what he was feeling. "Today, I'm going to meet Dawson, he said, his voice low and hesitant. Mrs. O'Hara looked at him with no surprise, as if she had already known this moment would come. Are you ready for it? She asked, her voice soft yet powerful. I don't know, Cole replied, his face solemn. I'm not sure what I'll do when I see him. I can't forget what he did to us. Mrs. O'Hara didn't rush to offer advice. She simply sat beside him, letting him think. The past is always a part of us. Cole. But you can't let the past control your life forever. Today, you're meeting him not to get revenge, but to settle what's unfinished. Her words were like a gentle breeze that eased Cole's anxiety. He realized that no matter what happened, this meeting wouldn't change the past, but it could change the way he looked at it. He needed to face the man who had caused him so much pain so he could stop being haunted by it. When breakfast ended, Eleanor came into the living room and noticed the serious expression on Cole's face. She understood immediately that today could be an important day for him. Do you want me to go with you? Eleanor asked, her eyes full of concern. Cole shook his head, a faint smile appearing on his face. No, I have to do this on my own, but you've already been more than enough for me. Eleanor smiled, though she didn't say anything. She understood that this was a moment when Cole needed to face his old challenges alone. Cole left the inn and made his way to the small area where Dawson was staying, a piece of land not far from the village, though he didn't want to. Cole couldn't forget those hard days when Dawson had betrayed everyone in the cattle drive, leaving them stranded when they needed him most. The anger and betrayal still weighed heavily on his heart, but he also knew that if he didn't resolve this, he wouldn't be able to move forward. When he arrived, Cole saw Dawson standing outside a small, simple cabin. Dawson recognized him immediately, his eyes full of caution, as though preparing for a battle. But Cole didn't rush. He walked up to Dawson, his gaze not filled with anger, but with calm determination. Dawson. Cole spoke, his voice firm but not hostile. It's time for us to talk. Dawson stood still for a moment, then nodded, his eyes full of hesitation. I didn't expect this meeting, but I couldn't avoid it, he said, his voice somewhat awkward but defensive. Cole looked Dawson in the eye, sensing the years he had spent hiding and regretting. I didn't come here for revenge, Cole said, his voice steady. I came here to settle what's been left unresolved. Dawson remained silent, eyeing Cole cautiously. I understand, he said, finally looking Cole straight in the eye. I know I was wrong, but I can't change the past. We can't change the past, but we can change the way we look at it, Cole replied, gently but with resolve. Today. I don't need an apology from you. I just need you to know that no matter what you've done, I won't let the past control me again. The conversation didn't bring complete reconciliation, but it allowed Cole to resolve feelings that had lingered for years. He didn't need Dawson to apologize. He just needed to close the door on the past and move forward. The important thing was that, in the end, he no longer allowed resentment to control him. As Cole made his way back to the inn, he felt a strange sense of relief. He knew this meeting was just a small step in a long journey, but it had brought him closer to peace. When he entered the inn, Mrs. O'Hara and Eleanor were waiting for him. Eleanor looked at him, her eyes full of understanding and love. Are you okay? She asked softly. Cole looked at her, smiling. I'm okay now, Eleanor. I'm ready to start over. Spring continued to pass by. and Talon Creek blossomed like a vibrant, lively painting. The trees began to sprout new leaves, and the small streams gurgled through the rocks, carrying with them new life. The sense of spring seeped into every piece of land, every seed, and into Cole's soul as well. Though he still felt the wounds of the past, the light of change, of new hope, had started to trickle into his life. After his meeting with Dawson, a part of Cole's heart had been released. He no longer had to live with anger or a sense of helplessness. He realized that no matter how heavy the past weighed on him, if he didn't learn to let go, he would forever live in the dark. And though it was a long process, a challenging journey, he was ready to move forward. That day, after returning home, Cole found Eleanor tending to the flowers in the garden. She was watering newly planted flowers, her hands swiftly moving from one watering can to the next, her eyes focused on the blooming petals. It was a simple yet warm scene. Cole stood watching her from a distance for a moment, feeling the peace of the moment. Eleanor looked up and saw Cole standing there. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice gentle but full of concern. "I was just thinking about the past," Cole replied, walking over. "There's a lot going on in my head right now, Eleanor. Sometimes it feels like I can't sort through it all." Eleanor smiled and set the watering can aside. "Don't rush. Cole, I know you've been through a lot, and every day you're finding a part of yourself. Don't feel like you need to be perfect right away." Her words were as gentle as a spring breeze, soothing the turmoil inside Cole. He realized that the process of change wasn't always easy, but if there was patience and someone by his side, everything would be okay. "You're right," Cole said, looking directly at Eleanor, his eyes full of gratitude. "Every step matters, whether it's big or small. But one thing I know for sure is that without you and Mrs. O'Hara, I wouldn't have made it this far." Eleanor looked at him, her eyes shining with emotion. "You won't have to walk this path alone. Cole, I'll always be by your side, no matter what you decide." A moment of silence passed, and then Cole smiled softly. "Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you for always believing in me and never giving up." After that morning, Cole began doing things he once thought he couldn't. He joined in with the work in the garden, helped Mrs. O'Hara tidy up the area around the inn, and started to rediscover the simple things he had forgotten over the years. These tasks didn't just give him a sense of a simple, peaceful life, but they also helped him reconnect with others, no longer living solely in the memories of the past. However, there was one thing Cole still had to face: the decision about his future. He had been given opportunities to love, to be loved, but the fear still lingered. Would he dare to fully open his heart to Eleanor, to the love she had for him, or would he continue to run as he had before? One afternoon, as the last light of the day turned the village golden, Cole and Eleanor sat together on the porch, looking out over the fields that were beginning to turn green. The surroundings were peaceful, with only the sound of birds chirping and the breeze rustling through the trees. It was a moment of peace that Cole had longed for, but he still felt something unresolved deep inside. Eleanor turned to look at him, her gaze gentle yet probing. "Cole, are you ready for what's ahead?" she asked, her voice soft like an invitation. Cole hesitated for a moment before responding. "You know, I'm ready to leave the past behind, but there's one thing I'm still afraid of. Eleanor, I'm scared that I'll fail again, that I'll hurt you." Eleanor took his hand, her eyes steady and full of conviction. You don't have to be afraid anymore. We don't need to be perfect. We just need to be ourselves. I believe you can do this. Cole, I believe in you." Cole looked into Eleanor's eyes, and for the first time, he felt no fear. Perhaps he couldn't change everything all at once, but he could start from here, from this moment. He didn't need to carry the past as a burden anymore. He had family, he had love, and most importantly, he wasn't alone anymore. "Are you sure you want to go with me on this journey?" Cole asked, his voice full of seriousness. Eleanor smiled and nodded. "I'm sure. Even though we'll face many challenges, I'll always be by your side." Cole felt a new sense of belief fill his heart. He didn't need to be afraid anymore. No matter how many challenges lay ahead, he knew he wasn't alone. He would walk through life with Eleanor, and together, they would build a new future, one where the past no longer weighed them down, but was simply a part of the story. With renewed determination, Cole stood up, took Eleanor's hand, and together they walked back into the house. They both knew they were ready for a new chapter in their lives, one where love and forgiveness would guide them to a bright future. May arrived, bringing with it the warm air of spring and a bright blue sky. Talon Creek was now full of life. The fields were lush and green, and the trees were growing abundantly, giving the surroundings a pristine beauty that could only be found in remote places like this. The wooden houses stood peacefully under the shade of towering trees, and life here continued to flow slowly and serenely. For Cole, this spring carried a special meaning. He had decided to embark on a new path, a path where the shadows of the past no longer weighed him down. After years of living in loneliness and pain, he had now found love, care, and forgiveness not only from others but also from himself. It hadn't come easily, but day by day, step by step, he felt he was living a different life, one that was full and hopeful. Even though he had stepped away from the ghosts of his past, Cole knew that life would never be easy. Each day was a challenge, not only for him but also for those around him. But now, he didn't have to face those challenges alone anymore. Eleanor was always by his side, supporting him not only during the hard times but also when he began to truly open up. She never pushed him to change too quickly, but with every small gesture, every handhold, every exchanged glance, she helped him realize he was not alone. Today, as the spring sunlight shone on the garden, Cole and Eleanor stood in front of Mrs. O'Hara's cabin, preparing to take on new work. Though the tasks were hard, they were part of their plan to turn this house into a stable place, a place where they could live together and build a future. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Eleanor asked, her eyes filled with concern. "We can take it slow. No need to rush." Cole looked into her eyes, then around the cabin. "I used to think I didn't need anything, but now I realize that I want to build a life that's not just about existing, but living truly, and you're an important part of that life." Eleanor smiled and nodded. "I want that too. Cole, I want us to build this life together." They both started working. They tidied up the garden, fixed the old walls of the cabin, and planted new flowers. It wasn't anything grand, but in these small tasks, they found connection, sharing, and love. Each step, each piece of work made Cole feel like he was gradually building a future he could trust and love. In the days that followed, their work became more routine. Cole no longer felt weighed down. no longer felt that the small tasks of life were too difficult. He felt a change within himself, a change that came from living with purpose, from living with sharing and love. He no longer had to live under the shadow of fear. Instead, there were new hopes, new dreams. One day, while they were resting in the garden, Mrs. O'Hara walked out of the house, seeing the two of them sitting together, chatting happily. "You're both doing so well," she said, her voice warm and proud. "I can see the change in both of you. Talon Creek will never be the same." Eleanor looked at Mrs. O'Hara, then turned to look at Cole. "We're building a future, Grandma, and we don't have to do it alone anymore." Mrs. O'Hara smiled, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Life always has its challenges, but as long as you have each other, you'll get through it all." Cole felt Mrs. O'Hara's words like a strong affirmation, a powerful encouragement. He looked at her, then at Eleanor, and felt his heart fill with gratitude. The feeling of having family, of having love beside him, made him stronger than ever before. "Thank you," Cole said, his voice deep but full of emotion. "Thank you for giving us the chance to start over. From now on, I won't live with the wounds of the past anymore." Mrs. O'Hara nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "Everyone can start over, as long as they dare. You've done the right thing." A few days later, as their work on the house neared completion, Cole and Eleanor sat together, looking out at the vast fields. They didn't say much, but in their eyes there was a deep understanding. They knew that, no matter what challenges the future would bring, they would face them together, building the life they both desired. Eleanor turned to Cole. "Do you think we can really live here, in this house?" For the long term, Cole thought for a moment before answering. "I don't know, but I'm sure I want to try for a different life, a life where I can love and be loved." Eleanor smiled, then took his hand. "I believe in you, Cole, and I believe we can do it." They sat together, not rushing, not worrying, only the peacefulness of a future that was slowly being built. And in that moment, Cole felt something important. He no longer had to face life alone. He had Eleanor, he had Mrs. O'Hara, and he had Talon Creek, and that was all he needed to begin a new chapter. Summer arrived in Talon Creek, bringing with it the golden warmth of the sun and gentle breezes. The vast fields were now cloaked in vibrant green. The flowers bloomed brightly, and the crystal-clear streams continued to flow through every corner of the village. But throughout this time, what made Talon Creek truly special wasn't just the beauty of nature. It was the profound changes in Cole's life. He was no longer the somber man living in the painful past. He had learned to open his heart, to embrace love and change, and now he faced even bigger decisions to build a more stable future. Eleanor and Mrs. O'Hara had always been a great source of encouragement for Cole. They helped him not only in the daily tasks but also in the important decisions he had to make. Since Cole stepped into this new life, he realized that everything could change if only he dared to step out of his fears and self-doubt. That morning, as the sun rose high in the sky, Cole and Eleanor worked together in the garden. Their work had gradually stabilized, and they were beginning to see the first fruits of the life they were building together. Mrs. O'Hara was also preparing a light meal in the kitchen, and the atmosphere in the inn was filled with tranquility. "We've accomplished a lot, haven't we?" Eleanor said, looking up at the newly planted flowers, her eyes sparkling with satisfaction. Cole nodded, gazing at the lush green plants. This might be one of the most beautiful springs I've had. Eleanor took his hand in a gentle gesture, but it was enough for Cole to feel the deep connection between them. I feel so lucky to have you here. Cole, it feels like we're really building a future. Cole smiled, looking at Eleanor with affection in his eyes. I feel the same way. Thank you for everything. The days that followed passed in peace and stability. However, Cole knew that what he had built wasn't easy to maintain. Since he started working with others and sharing responsibilities with Mrs. O'Hara and Eleanor, he realized that this life required sacrifice and commitment. Every step, no matter how small, was a part of the change he was undergoing. Then, one day, Cole received a letter from his brother, Adam, whom he hadn't been in touch with for a long time. Adam had been living in a larger town outside Talon Creek and rarely returned. The letter from Adam surprised Cole. It wasn't just a letter to catch up, but an invitation to join his business. Adam was expanding his operations in the city and wanted Cole to join him as part of the company he was growing. Cole felt a strange sensation as he read those lines. For a moment, he felt like everything in his life had been turned upside down. This was an opportunity many people dreamed of: a stable job, a wide-open future, and the personal growth he had never dared to imagine after all the pain of his past. But, deep down, Cole knew that going back to the life he had left behind, the life where he had been hurt and no longer felt like himself, was a decision he wasn't sure he could make. Eleanor noticed the change in Cole's eyes as he read the letter. She knew he was struggling with a big decision, and she understood this wasn't an easy thing for him. "What do you plan to do about that letter?" Eleanor asked, her voice gentle, but her eyes filled with concern. Cole looked up at Eleanor, sensing the worry in her gaze. "Adam invited me to join his company. This is an opportunity I can't ignore, but I'm not sure if I can leave." Eleanor sat down beside Cole, taking his hand. "Do you feel like this is what you want?" Cole thought for a moment before answering. "Part of me wants to go. I want a different life, a life not burdened by the past. But another part of me feels like I'm starting fresh here, in Talon Creek. This is where I found peace, where I began again from everything I lost." Eleanor listened in silence, not rushing to offer an answer. "We'll decide together. Cole, whether you choose to go or stay, I'll always be by your side, but I just want you to do what feels right for you." The feeling of sharing the burden, of being listened to and understood, made Cole feel lighter. He realized that, no matter what decision he made, the support of Eleanor and Mrs. O'Hara was the most precious thing he had. Eleanor's words were a reminder that he didn't have to face any decision alone. "Thank you, Eleanor. I don't know what to say, but you've helped me so much. Maybe I won't go anywhere. Maybe the life we're building here is where I'm meant to stay." Eleanor smiled, gently patting his hand. "I believe you'll make the right decision, no matter what. I'll always be by your side." They sat together in silence for a moment, looking out at the blue sky and the vibrant greenery. With each passing day, Cole felt the change in his heart grow stronger. He didn't need to fear big decisions anymore, because he knew that, no matter what, he didn't have to walk alone. The next day, when the sun rose high, Cole went to Talon Creek's library to think more about his decision. He needed more time to carefully consider it. And as he stepped outside, The gentle summer breeze ruffled his hair, and he felt the peace within his heart. Whatever decision he made, he knew he was ready to face new challenges with a heart full of love and hope. Time passed gently, but with great significance for Cole. The long days in Talon Creek helped him realize that it wasn't the grand decisions or loud changes that made a difference in life, but the small moments, the simple things he was building with Eleanor and Mrs. O'Hara every day. These steps were guiding him toward a future he had never imagined, a future not haunted by the past, but full of hope and love. Summer had truly arrived, bringing long days and warm sunshine. Talon Creek, once a small village, was now bustling more with the visitors who stopped by. Though life here still moved slowly, it was the peacefulness that Cole had grown to love. He began to feel the changes within himself, not just emotionally, but also in how he faced life. Recently, Cole had not only been tending to the garden or helping Mrs. O'Hara fix up the old cabin, but also taking time to reflect on himself and the future he wanted to build. Although he had made great strides, one thing still lingered in Cole's mind: the letter from Adam, his brother. Adam's invitation to join his business was an opportunity many would not turn down. But for Cole, it was not an easy decision. Adam lived in a completely different world, a busy, challenging life full of opportunities. Meanwhile, Cole had found peace and warmth in Talon Creek after years of living in the shadows. This left him wondering if he should leave everything behind to start a new life in the city. That day, after finishing some work in the garden, Cole decided to sit down with Mrs. O'Hara and Eleanor. He knew that, although this decision was his, their support and love would always be the most important things to him. Mrs. O'Hara had been like a second mother to him, and Eleanor had helped him open his heart to love again. As Cole entered the inn, the sunlight coming through the window created a warm, familiar atmosphere in the room. Mrs. O'Hara was sitting with a book, and Eleanor was preparing dinner. The silence in the air was filled with warmth, making Cole feel at ease. He walked over to the table, sat down, and took a deep breath. "What's going on?" Cole Eleanor asked, looking at him with a touch of concern. "Is something making you think so much?" Cole looked into her eyes, the eyes he had learned to love over the past few months. "I received a letter from Adam," he began, his voice deep and thoughtful. "He wants me to join his company, a stable job in the city. It's a big opportunity, Eleanor, but I don't know if I should leave here." Eleanor sat down beside him, listening carefully to every word he said. She didn't rush, just gently took his hand. "I understand this isn't an easy decision. You're facing a life that maybe you're not ready for, but if you feel it's the right thing, I'll support you." Mrs. O'Hara looked at them, her gaze gentle yet filled with understanding. "Cole, sometimes opportunities don't come to be passed up, but for us to decide the path we want to walk, whether you stay or go, what matters is doing what feels right for you." Mrs. O'Hara's words made Cole feel lighter. He realized that it wasn't about whether to stay or leave. It was about whether he had the courage to live fully with his decision. After years of living in pain and regret, he now had the chance to step out and seek a new future. But was Talon Creek the place where he found peace, enough to make him stay? I've thought a lot about it, and I realize there's something more important than work or success," Cole said, his voice firm. "It's love and connection. I've found that here, With you and with Mrs. O'Hara." Eleanor smiled, gently holding his hand. "I don't want you to make this difficult decision just because of me. I want you to do what feels right. Whatever you choose, I'll always be by your side." Cole looked at Mrs. O'Hara, then back at Eleanor. His eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you, Mrs. O'Hara, for always believing in me. Whether I go or stay, I'll always remember what I've learned here." That evening, as they sat together for dinner, the warmth filled the house. All three of them knew that no matter what decision Cole made, they would still be together. Talon Creek had become a real home to Cole, where he no longer felt alone or lost. Each day he spent here, he found more reasons to stay, to love, and to be loved. When dinner was over, Cole stood up, turned to Mrs. O'Hara and Eleanor. "I think I've made my decision," he said, his voice full of certainty. "I'm not going anywhere. I want to stay here, with you, with Mrs. O'Hara, and build a future together." Eleanor and Mrs. O'Hara looked at each other, then at Cole, their eyes filled with emotion. "We'll build this future together," Eleanor said, and Mrs. O'Hara nodded, offering a gentle smile. In the days that followed, Cole felt peace in his heart. He no longer had to worry about leaving the life he had worked so hard to build. He had found family, love, and the peace he had always wanted. With each passing day, he felt more and more like himself, no longer afraid or anxious about the past. As summer drew near, Talon Creek grew even more peaceful than ever. The sunny mornings, the quiet afternoons, and the sweet moments spent together made Cole realize that no matter where life took him, as long as he had love, family, and companionship, he would always be able to overcome any hardship. As summer passed, Talon Creek gradually shifted into the cool days of autumn. Gentle winds blew through the trees, causing the golden leaves to fall in waves. While the weather grew colder, Cole felt that these days were filled with warmth and hope. He had decided to stay, not only because of love, but also because of the peace that Talon Creek had brought him. Together with Eleanor and Mrs. O'Hara, Cole now felt a life that was fuller and more complete than ever before. But despite all this, Cole couldn't forget the lessons he had learned throughout his journey. He knew that every decision in life came with consequences, and he had to tread carefully with the steps he took next. While he had found happiness in his current life, challenges still lay ahead that he had to face. One morning, as the sun streamed through the window, Eleanor walked in with unexpected news. "Cole, someone's here to see you," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "A man from outside the town says you have an unpaid debt." Cole froze, unable to believe what he was hearing. "A debt? I don't owe anyone anything," he replied, but a sense of unease rose within him. He couldn't understand why someone would show up talking about a debt he had never heard of. Eleanor looked at him, then continued. "He said his name is Elias Turner. He says you owe him a large sum from many years ago. He wants to meet you at the cafe in town." A strange thought crossed Cole's mind. That name, Elias Turner, sounded familiar, but he couldn't remember any debt. Furthermore, he had lived a life free of debts and obligations. Why was this happening now? Eleanor gave him a concerned look. "Do you think we should go meet him?" Cole paused, thinking about what he had just heard. His life now didn't involve worrying about money or complicated relationships, but if there was something that needed to be addressed, he couldn't avoid it forever. He looked at Eleanor and then made his decision. "I'll go meet him. I don't want anything hanging over us." Eleanor nodded, smiling gently. "I'll go with you, if you need me." They walked to the town cafe, where, according to the stranger, Cole was supposed to meet Elias Turner. Talon Creek wasn't a big place, and everyone knew each other. But this only made Cole more confused. He had no ties to anyone from his past, and now someone from that time was showing up with issues he had never thought about. When they reached the cafe, a middle-aged man was sitting in the corner, waiting. His appearance resembled someone Cole had known a long time ago, but the memory wasn't very clear. The man looked up as Cole and Eleanor walked in, his eyes filled with caution. "Cole Donovan?" he asked, his voice deep and gruff. "Yes, that's me. You're Elias Turner," Cole replied, trying to recall any details about the past that he might have missed. Elias Turner stood up and extended his hand, although it seemed a bit reluctant. "Yes, I'm Elias. I've come to discuss an old issue. There's a debt you owe me, and I think it's time to settle it." Cole felt discomfort wash over him. He couldn't recall any debt, but Elias's words made him uneasy. "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't owe you anything." Elias looked at Cole with cold eyes. "It's not a large sum, but it's time to pay. What you owe me isn't just money. It's a matter of fairness." Cole felt something was off. He tried to remember the details, but his memory of Elias and any debt remained hazy. "I can't remember," Cole said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "I don't know what you're talking about." Elias shook his head, sat down again, and waved for Cole to sit. "You don't remember, I understand. But this is the truth. This debt stems from an old deal. A trade you made a few years ago, a bargain I've let slide for all this time. But now, I can't keep going on like this." Eleanor stood quietly beside him, listening to the conversation she didn't fully understand, but she could feel the tension in the air. "We need to clear this up," she said, her eyes full of determination. "Cole isn't someone who will run from his past. If there's something to resolve, we'll settle it once and for all." The three of them sat down and began discussing what had happened. After a while, Cole began to understand that the debt wasn't monetary. It was a deal from his past when he had worked with a cattle driving group. Some illegal dealings had taken place, and while Cole hadn't directly participated in the wrongful actions, he was still part of it. Over the years, Cole had distanced himself from these complicated relationships, but now everything was resurfacing like a nightmare. Elias explained that Cole needed to pay for the damages caused by the old transaction, but instead of feeling anger, Cole realized that this was an opportunity to close a chapter of his past. Though it was painful, though it was hard, he couldn't continue to live in avoidance. "So how do I pay this debt?" Cole asked, his voice calm but resolute. Elias looked at Cole, a glint of something in his eyes. "We'll settle everything, Cole, but I need you to do something for me. And that's the only way this will all come to an end." Cole's story is more than just about a man seeking love and peace in life. It's a lesson about facing the past, not by running from it, but by accepting it and learning from the mistakes. The great lesson here is each of us has the power to choose a new path, even when age or life's difficulties make us doubt our ability to change. Don't fear making big decisions, because change is the key to healing the wounds in your heart. When you allow yourself to move beyond the past, you'll realize that life always offers second chances, as long as you're willing to open your heart and believe in yourself. Thank you for following this journey. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to continue this adventure with us on the next chapters. Wishing you always find peace and joy in your life.